Hello and welcome to another Mjolnir the Movies special because Neil's not here again, sadly. But we thought we would have a little look at the sister site of Dust. Dust, of course, is the science fiction platform on YouTube. And its sister site, if you like, its sister channel is called Alter. And so we're going to look at Alter. Alter is a site for horror, as opposed to science fiction. And so we're going to have a little look at a few horror shorts. And we've chosen a few we've both seen and a few we don't know, actually. But one thing that I find with Alter, which I don't find as much with Dust, is I find there are a lot of politics embedded in the Alter site and the videos on the Alter site, and not quite so much with Dust, really. I think that Dust has a far more open platform, whereas Alter seems much more politically driven. I don't know if you got that impression, or is it just me?
I'll not spoil it straight away, but I watched a couple which were, I would call, overtly political. Because you can always argue about politics when you start to try to examine a plot or certain things in a setting, but some of them really throw it in your face and it's obvious. It's like a political advert rather than a short story for some of them. Although I won't put it down straight away, I'll say that there's a whole bunch of them that are not like that. There are some good ones in there where it's the story first before politics.
Yeah, you're right in that there are some very good ones that don't have the politics in your face, but I find that on the whole there is a far greater percentage of politically minded shorts than there are on Dust.
Part of the setup of this, we'll explain, was we both picked randomly without telling each other some of the shorts. So we've both done a random sample and found, unlike Dust, this political element to it. Maybe it's just extraordinary bad luck for both of us, but I think it's probably telling of overall the direction of it.
Yeah, that's right. I find it quite strange that we both found the same thing, that it has politically driven agendas on it. In fact, that brings us to the first one, which we've both seen, actually, and we just sort of had a little bit of a laugh about it before we came on air. And it's this horror short, The Invaders. Could you really call it a horror short, though? Because it's, to me, it's not horrific at all. It's just extremely political and more of a dystopian drama, or an attempt at one anyway.
It actually failed even as a horror. I'm surprised it was included, although the fact it was included gives the hint that they're going to allow a bending of the rules and a bending of the quality to include something that's so overtly political with that slant.
Yes. One of the things that I found was that some seem to have been pigeonholed in there, and really they belonged on the Dust channel because they were more sci-fi than they were horror. But they've tried to start off this new channel, this spin-off, if you like, and they've thrown them on there when they don't really quite belong, just to kind of start off the channel. That's the impression I got. I'm going to come to one in a little while. Although you could sort of make the argument that it's horror. Sci-fi tends to go in all kinds of different directions and is more a mode than a genre, really. Yeah. If you look at a film like Alien, is it a horror or is it a sci-fi? Well, it's a bit of both, isn't it, really?
Or The Cube, which is considered more horror, but it's certainly got sci-fi to it.
Yeah, that's right. So it's difficult, really. Where does one begin? Where does the other end? But certainly I think that The Invaders has been thrown on here and it doesn't belong.
No, it certainly doesn't, because it's certainly not a horror, because, as I say, it's like a political broadcast, party political or a social pressure group broadcast. And even the quality of it felt very thin in the ground. The story, everything about it. And what makes it even worse is when you go into it, unlike most of them, it's got this director's commentary pasted underneath it. Huge.
Yeah, well, I was just about to read that out.
Oh, I'll let you do it. I've not got it written down here, so.
Oh, right. Well, I'm just looking at it now. I haven't written it down. It's actually plastered underneath the video itself on Dust.
And that's...
on Alter.
Yeah, it's unbelievable to actually have this political explanation below a video. It's just so absurd.
Yeah,
it also shows that he can't
like a little manifesto.
Yeah, it is like a manifesto. And he can't even get his message across in the short film. So even he knows it's a failure.
Yeah, that's very true, actually. I mean, it's failed as a film, hasn't it, if he's got to write the thing down afterwards.
And it'll take you longer to read his screed below it than it would to watch the film.
Yeah, the director's a guy called Mateo Marquez. Does that mean I've got to read this in a Hispanic accent or what?
If you can manage it. I'd love to know a Yorkshire Hispanic accent would be like.
Dear gringos. No. It's just, yeah, I'll just, well, unless you want to read this crap out, but.
Not at all. I've not got it in front of me.
No, that's all right. Okay, well, I'll do it then.
It goes on and on, though.
So, as it says, director Mateo Marquez's statement on the film, The Invaders is my dramatic representation of the anti-Muslim sentiment that is spreading through the United States and other Western countries. Hateful rhetoric and the promotion of negative stereotypes have sown uncertainty and fear among Muslims living in the West. Muslims have become victims of violence, marginalization, and exclusion from social, political, and civil life. Muslim women and men have been verbally and sometimes even physically attacked as attitudes towards them have turned to violent extremes. The Invaders imagines a world in which this hysteria has now been institutionalized as jailer, a Muslim girl, runs in fear from agents of an amoral totalitarian government. Although my film addresses a contemporary socio-political issue, it borrows techniques from the horror and science fiction film genres to punch out jailer's fear and the anxiety of her community. Mike Gaglioretto, my director of photography, and I decided to keep Jailer's pursuers off-screen until the film's final reveal in order to engage audiences through suspense. During the first half of the film, the frame almost exclusively shows Jailer capturing her fear and confusion as she tries to escape a threat the audience cannot see. Actually, I'm not going to read the rest of it because, for fuck's sake, it does go on, doesn't it?
It goes on and on and on. But what is interesting is once again hyping up this ridiculous, the threat and fear and this, they're victims. But yet, apparently endless millions of them want to come into the West, so bollocks to that. If I thought there was a house across the road full of people who hated me and were going to victimise me and any minute now going to gas me to death, I probably wouldn't go into it.
Yeah.
So... I suspect that this terrible hype he's claiming of problems exist doesn't exist because nobody would be coming into the West if that was the case.
Yeah. Just to say what the film is all about, I mean, it's only, 6 and a bit minutes long, something like that.
But you'll still want to skip by it. You'll be wanting fast forward halfway.
Well, I can sum it up in probably a sentence or two. Basically, there's this woman in a niqab. She's from the Middle East. She's running down, quite obviously, a British street because of the houses, the architecture and everything. So, obviously, she's the invader, not the others. But anyway, less of the irony. The plot, basically, is she runs down the street. She runs into her home, or her new home. And basically, there are these people in typical black kind of police state uniforms that you get in the dystopian fiction, and she gets gassed, and that's it.
The problem with this is, in his rush to make his political broadcast, because that's what it is, none of it makes any sense. She's walking about the streets. Apparently, it's a totalitarian government that's now literally gassing people in their homes to death, yet she's just walking about the street. It doesn't, living in this big house. It was a hell of a big house in a nice neighbourhood. So somehow she's this middle-class person, and yet she's no awareness at all. Because you'd have to have some education and money to live there. But yet she's completely unaware that the entire government is gassing people in their houses.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't make any sense. That cannot happen. If you're living in fear like that, you don't walk about the street on your own and then go, how did this happen?
Yeah, I mean, you would have thought it should have strapped a bomb to a belt or something like that, wouldn't you? Which I don't know.
Narratively, it makes no sense. The situation doesn't make any sense. The behaviour doesn't. If they'd shown her like on the run and maybe in some sort of maybe abandoned building or something, and then surprise, you thought she was on the run from monsters or aliens, but she was actually this. That would have been a better written story. But he couldn't even write it like that. They had a nonsensical setting. This is because he put politics first. The reason he put her in that setting was so that the middle class would identify it with a very normal-looking middle-class situation. In his statement, he declares that the outfit given to her was done for political reasons. It was deliberately Americanized, westernized as much as possible with the trainers and the outfit, with just the headwear to hint at her beliefs and her origins. Likewise, when she speaks on the phone.
I mean, in his manifesto, of course, he talks about the uncertainty and fear among Muslims living in the West. Why don't they go back to the East then? You see, where do we go exactly? You see, the imposition is upon us, not upon them.
Yeah, and this is the problem.
And it's like when Malcolm X talked about they didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on them. Well, they've landed on us, not the other way around. She's obviously dressed as alienly as possible, if alienly is indeed a word. But I think you can see what I'm driving at. She's dressed in the niqab, this headscarf. Deliberately, there's nothing in the Quran about wearing headscarves. This is just basically a statement of otherness, really. And so she's really pushing, or rather the character, it's the director really, the director-writer, who is actually pushing this onto us and pushing this in our face.
Yeah, and as he said, it's done to get an emotional tie from the audience to her, the character. This is why he's dressed her this way, put her in that setting. But
who's going to identify with her? Actually, it must be directed towards Muslims.
Well, I'd imagine significantly. I notice when you're watching it, they've actually got the live chat. There's actually quite a lot of Arabic in the live chat.
Well, does it have a live chat? I didn't notice that. I didn't see that at all. Right.
You've got to sometimes click the show chat replay next to it, and you can actually watch the chat as it goes. Can't read a word of it, of course, but it was just notable because I've never seen people writing in Arabic on the channel before, or...
Yeah, it probably says death to the infidels or something like that.
I think a few of them were talking about dismissing jinns because they just said that it would have been more interesting from their point of view if the smoke was a jinn rather than from some sort of massed special forces. Which I thought actually would probably be true if he just went full... If he'd set it in the Middle East and had her running from a jinn, it would actually have been more interesting, probably more authentic than this political nonsense.
One of the interesting things about the film is the amount of likes and dislikes, because, of course, you'll always get an extreme amount of tampering with the likes and dislikes anyway by YouTube. And yet, for all that, there are 3.3 thousand likes and 1.2 thousand dislikes. And that is quite an extraordinary ratio, because the ratio between the others is far greater. Normally you have far greater likes to dislikes, but that shows dissent.
And you can be sure that the comments will be heavily pruned.
Oh yeah. So you'll have people employed, probably not in a financial sense, but in a voluntary capacity, to give extra likes and so on by the channel themselves, Alter.
And you've even got the social pressure aspect where they'll be telling, come and give this a like because it's telling a good message. So people who probably no interest in sci-fi will be getting links to this in their social media, and people feel pressured to do the right thing.
Yeah. There's one comment here. As a Muslim, I appreciate your film and your support of us with a capital U. Really, I thankfully from my deep hearth. May peace be every corner on earth. Right. Well, unfortunately, we don't seem to have much peace wherever the Muslims go, do we? But, yeah, the religion of peace and all that. But it's quite appalling, as you've said, even if we don't agree with the message, which we don't, of course. But still, it's a bad film as a film. It's a nothing film.
It's nonsense. It's badly written. Even I thought, I'll give it a chance. Don't make assumptions. Go into it with a fresh mind. And it's still just bad. This is the problem with it. There's other ones there which have politics, but they're still well done, and you can just kind of see the humour or the cleverness of it. And I think, fair enough, there's talent involved in that, even if I don't agree with what they're pushing. But this is actually just bad. Even the idea that if there's going to be some death squad going door to door, one, as I covered, why didn't she seem to notice the fact that there's death squads going door to door until this moment? And how did she... because she immediately knew what was going on. And allegedly these death squads are just walking about the street and then run after you down the street huffing and puffing for ages. Because remember, she turns round the street and starts going, "Oh no!" Because that's not how, what, did they not have a van? Does the government not afford cars anymore? Is this a Jeep or something?
Well, when I saw the title there, The Invaders, I was rather hoping that David Vincent would turn up, but sadly not.
And then they've got
That's one for the aficionados.
You've got the whole thing as well with the obvious fog machine. I mean, it just looked like dry ice fog machine type stuff. It looked really cheap, like they nicked it at a local school disco or something and stuck it up at the door, and you see the obvious vapour, because it's not smoke, because it's not rising, so the obvious vapour going in, which wouldn't affect her at all, because if it's heavier than air, how's she going to be getting gassed by it? She just needs to stand up and walk away. You can gas somebody with something that's crawling along the floor as if she stuck her head down in the floor. But they've got this gas coming in, and allegedly that's how they bump her off, because they stick her in a body bag at the end. Well, wait a minute, the government don't have guns. They thought, well, the most efficient way is to get a slow gas that crawls across the floor and hope that she falls onto the floor so she breathes it in.
Well, again,
it's
I
so
think that
badly
is
done.
Political. I think that is a reference to the Holocaust, so-called. I think that they've deliberately cobbled together a gassing scene to reference the so-called 6 million.
Certainly could have been written better. Even as a political broadcast, it was badly written.
Yeah, because the idea behind the film, we don't get it in the film, but in that director's manifesto, he talks about that these people would be ethnically cleansed and so on. And so I think that gassing is referencing the oft-referenced Holocaust. But there we go.
But
that's my take on it.
And despite that, though, the people who share the character's belief in ethnicity thought it was a djinn. As I say, it would have probably been a more interesting story if they did do that.
I might have got on board with it more.
And it would have fitted horror more.
Yeah.
Have a supernatural djinn. And if they'd set it in the Middle East, I wouldn't have had a problem. I would have enjoyed it fully. Fully authentic, set in the Middle East with Middle Eastern actors. I would have been fine for that. Even if I had to watch subtitles, I'd have given it at the time.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, that's the thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've watched films from other countries and other cultures and so on.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. It's when they suddenly sort of implant their cultures onto us. I don't mind them having their own cultures in their own part of the world. It's a good thing. And I can appreciate their cultures and so on. But it's not ours, and we've got our own, and we should be proud of ours, and we shouldn't be importing these people with alien cultures into our societies, because they will ultimately change the culture of that society, because the people themselves are different.
And I thought it was interesting, though, that, as I noticed in the comments, that these people from that part of the world also thought this would have been improved if it was more authentic into their world, instead of this kind of mishmash shoved into our world where it doesn't fit anybody.
Well, this is the thing about multiculturalism and all that kind of thing. It's a very superficial view. It's a very bourgeois view of culture. And the bourgeoisie has absolutely no idea about culture whatsoever. And this is why when they took the place of the aristocracy, they had no idea what they were doing. And this has proven to be so. Everyone is alienated by this globalist mass culture. This nothing, this superficial sheen that's based on consumerism and buying shit that nobody really wants. It has no depth for anyone.
It doesn't speak to anybody's soul or doesn't connect to them.
That's right. And so some Muslim in Arabia or whatever thinking about jinns and so, that's great. That's for them. That's wonderful. And I could watch a film about that if it was well done and so on. And I would think, that's really interesting and so on. But I wouldn't want to import it, of course, because I've got my own culture.
Likewise, I would understand the sadness in seeing whatever foreign country, if you go to their capital or some city there or even a local town, you see nothing but McDonald's and Starbucks in it. I think that's quite sad. Just the same as seeing that across Europe now, I think it's quite sad. Nothing but these global chain stores. It's the same thing.
Oh, absolutely right. Yeah. And this again is this bourgeois culture based on economics, the dismal science, of course, as Thomas Carlyle called it, as opposed to the gay saber of culture, of poetry, and gay in the old sense of the word, of course. We don't support that kind of deconstruction of semantics that has come up from the homosexual lobby. And so this superficial sheen that is being pushed upon us, it is to be rejected, not just by us, but by everyone all over the world.
Yeah, I'm quite sure it'd be for their benefit in every sense.
Yeah. And so in a way, I can understand the Muslims far better than anyone on the liberal side, on the left, who try to make allies with them and so on, and have no understanding of them whatsoever, because their belief system is absolute, and they have an absolute belief in their religiosity, in their culture, and so on. And liberals and socialists and so on, they do not understand that whatsoever, because they don't have a belief in anything, really, deep down. What have they got as a system to base things on? Economics.
And
Homo economicus. The consumerist man. Is that it? Is that all there is to human existence?
And you see how they try and fill the void, rather than having something solid and singular that they can cling to and say is wholly theirs and they're part of it, and something that will continue after them.
Yeah.
They try and fill it with this sort of tourism, either at home or abroad, where they, like a buffet, pick a bit of this, pick a bit of that, but it's all superficial. It's just the top layer they want to taste.
Yeah, of course. I've unfortunately had to live in bourgeois society, particularly through work and so on. And I can't stand these people at these soirees and parties and so on who go on about, oh, we did India last year. And I said, oh, really? Did you see the entire of India? Did you live like Indians? How long did you go for? 10 years? 20? No, we went for 4 weeks. Oh, 4 weeks. You must know the entire of Indian culture and history. And
That's it.
fuckwits.
Managed to meet over 1 billion people in 4 weeks.
I know. You learned all those different languages that they speak in 4 weeks. That's fucking impressive, I can tell you. Yeah, so you can imagine that I'm not enthralled about bourgeois sensibilities, and it is really, it's an anti-cultural view of the world, really. They talk about being cultivated and being cultured and so on. They have no idea. Most of these people, they don't even speak a foreign language.
What they find wonderful and fawn over when they travel abroad is what they would deny and despise at home. So they'll go over the authenticity of a culture abroad and how wonderful it is some tribe has held on to their beliefs from thousands of years, and yet at home they'll think this is some terrible concept altogether.
Yeah, they're always trying to deconstruct things like Morris dancing and so on, which is a homegrown ethnic expression of ourselves, of our own identity, of our own dance. And they lampoon it and take the piss out of it all the time. And what they do is they try to put on the BBC the most effete kind of people doing it. But if you go to the Whitby Folk Festival, it's nothing like that whatsoever. It's extremely vigorous, it's extremely acrobatic and athletic, and quite vigorous and violent. I mean, they don't just tap sticks. They smash them into each other and so on. And they throw each other up in the air. There's the sword dancing, of course, where you've got the blades flying around. It's not swords in the sense that people think of swords. It's more like a saw, really, with handles at both sides.
Uh-huh.
You can see it actually on The Wicker Man, the old one, not the fucking Nicolas Cage shite.
Not the beast! Not the beast!
I'm sorry to disparage Nicolas Cage. It's there for a moment, the finest actor of our generation. But anyway, I think we ought to move on a little bit because we spent quite some time on that.
I think so, but yeah, so we've kind of opened with a turd there, I think, but it had to be passed, like all turds, to get on to other things.
Well, I'm going to continue with the theme of politicization of films because there are one or two others as well, perhaps less so. I'm going to come on to The Herd. I don't know if you saw that or not.
No, I've not seen this one, so this will be interesting.
Again, it failed as a film because, quite simply, I worked it out in the first few seconds what it was all about. It's about cannibalism, and the herd are really people. They're obviously some kind of genetically engineered people because they're super strong and so on. So borrowing a bit from Blade Runner. And it's like an Australian farm or a, I don't know, a Midwestern American farm or something like that. That looks to be the setting of it anyway. And these larger than average people herded and then slaughtered and used for food. It's poorly done because you work it out in the first few seconds what's going on. There's a political slant that is obviously written by the vegan brigade. With the young son is 13 years old and said that they understand me. They understand when I call them, and you've named them, son, you've named them, and all that kind of stuff. You don't give them names, and it's so overwrought and so badly done. You see, this is the problem when you think of the politics first. In every film, you'll fail because politics is the last thing you should be thinking about. The first thing you should be thinking about is culture. First thing you should be thinking about is art. Is it good as art?
Yeah.
If it's not good as art, then it'll fail as politics anyway. And what you will do is you will piss people off. And people will reject your message because they don't like being talked down to and because they don't like being told what to think.
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of these things are hit and miss. They could have made the film, and naturally your sort of thinking in politics will surface in your writing or your films or whatever you're producing. It can surface your beliefs naturally, because that's informing your worldview and what you try to shape anyway.
Yeah. Did you come across any other politicised ones?
I kind of went through the list and I thought I'll pick out the most popular, some older ones, and some different, if I could find media. There was one called Less Than Human. It attracted my attention because it was obviously a 3D animation, stood out from the live action, as most of them are. And it was obviously a very high quality animation, the sort of Pixar studio quality, if you'd imagine. It's set in a world of post-zombie apocalypse where they've found the cure and cured the zombies, but unfortunately they've remained in a sort of zombie state, but they're now no longer eating brains or something. And you've got a guy on the scene, this reporter with a cameraman, and he's a sort of hostile reporter questioning whether or not they're fit to be part of society or if, they can be integrated. You can already see where the politics are going with it, and they show the zombies as being very human and gentle, and one of them's sort of an effete sort of liberal hippie type who's talking about this special honey light, and another guy's with some sort of regional sales manager or going to be, and he's kind of more down to earth. But they're both horrible zombies, and the idea is to humanise them by making them talk about very mundane things. And the humour's meant to come from the over-the-top reaction by the reporter and the zombies acting more normal than him. It actually worked better, I would say, than the Invaders. If they wanted to do a political film, they could have done that. There was some humour to it, but unfortunately the politics gets in the way again. It could actually have been an interesting film. Could have had some humour in that. You could have done an interesting story in the setting. If it just dialed it down a bit, it would have still obviously had the politics in it because it's informed with the creator, but it did unfortunately tamp down the quality of it. And at the end, it's even got the reporter outside with "go back to the graveyard" or something, go back home kind of thing, painted on the background, in shot, very obvious at the closing, while the reporters... It's so obvious, the political, it's not ambiguous at all. And then once again, you look below. It's funny that what you look below and you've got a bit of blurb about how, oh, this is a blah 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 political, it's to address prejudice. Why do all these ones that go so far to shove it down your throat, the politics, feel the need to then explain the politics in a written statement to go under it?
Because the politics are not natural, simple as that.
It does really tell a lot when they've got to explain. There's ones in this, which I'm no doubt we've both watched, where it's just a good film, a good short film, and it's very mysterious, but they just leave it up to you. They say, oh, what do you think this story meant? Or what do you think this scene meant? Or, even like sometimes the channel has written that, whoever operates the channel, but under that their account has written, oh, what do you think this story meant? And they just leave it up to you to interpret because it's mysterious, which is not a bad thing. Horror works well with mystery. But with the political ones, they always seem to have this statement to tell you what to think and how to think about it. And I thought, that's bad. If you're shoving it into somebody's face and you then have to add on a layer of written text to read after the film to tell you what to think about it, you've failed twice.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there's a film that I saw called Splinter, where you get that similar othering and sympathy for the other, and in this case, they're vampires.
Oh, similar idea then.
Yeah,
and it's such a shame to see the talent. The one I saw was very good animation. So there's obviously talent there, there's voice actors, but it's wasted.
Yeah, Splinter was better done in terms of politics in that they weren't overt like the ones in the film that you watched, but it wasn't as good a film. It was this, the idea is that there's this vampire dying in a vampire hospital and so on. Again, it's meant to bring it out slowly, but it doesn't really work because you realize in the first minute what's going on and that they're really vampires and everything. And it's got this splinter that's slowly moving down to his heart and it's going to kill him, of course, because it's like a stake, that kind of thing. And apparently it was due to an accident and that they don't drink other people's blood anymore. They've become more PC. So there's a bit of this idea that, well, Islam was violent in the past, but they're becoming more and more civilized and so on. It's all that kind of thing in there. But it's left to interpretation rather than actually at the end you get some kind of political message. It's just that it's quite dull, actually. That's the problem with it, is that it's quite dull, and I wouldn't call it a horror at all. It's sort of more of a drama, but you have vampires there. There's a nice little touch at the end there where he's turning to dust, and it doesn't show you the whole thing of him turning to dust. It just shows you his face kind of turning sort of black, flaky, if you see what I mean. The skin going flaky, and then it cuts away. Unfortunately, after that scene, there's his daughter there with bits of dust in her hand and so on, which shows you the hospital bed, and there's no other fucking dust there. So they ruined it. They should have looked at that, really. That is an easy one to pick up on.
Yeah.
It wasn't a good film. I mean, they get sort of marks for trying. There's one or two little touches that are nice there, like when he's talking about... he has a little existentialist dialogue, which is rather nice, when he talks about art and about why some artworks are destroyed and others live forever and so on. And I thought that was quite nice, that philosophical dialogue. Unfortunately, the rest of the film, as a vehicle for that little dialogue, was not good enough. But if they'd had a better film and put that dialogue in it, it would have worked marvellously well.
So close, but no cigar.
Yeah, well, not even that close, really. You see, the thing is that they had that dialogue in it, which was really nice, but everything else failed.
That's what happened with Less Than Human, the zombie themed one. There was a lot of really good things about it, like the animation quality, voiceover, the concept, and the kind of opening as you go into it. I was like, oh, this could be interesting. And then it just felt flabby, like it was tired. And you go, okay, I get the idea, they're human-like. And then it never went beyond that. It just kept trying to say, look how human they are. Look how human they are. Look how human they are. And okay, I get the idea. Now move on with the story. But there was no story beyond that. It was just trying to say that and nothing but that. And it just dragged on. It could have actually been cut down to a minute. Instead of over nearly 6 minutes, it could have been cut down to a minute because there was nothing to tell.
Yeah, you see, that had some good ideas in there. As I say, this existentialist idea on immortality and on the artist's search for immortality and so on, and yet that often certain works are obliterated, and therefore, if the artist's work is obliterated, the artist's memory itself is obliterated, and so the search is futile. But in other artists' cases, of course, their art lives on, and so we know the artwork and therefore often the artists themselves.
An interesting thing to
That
think
was
about.
that was something that was really interesting. I just wish it had a better vehicle to put it in, because it was a really good little dialogue. But anyway, yeah, the other one I'm going to come to, which is highly political, is Slaughterbots. I don't know if you saw that.
No, I've not seen this one.
Again, that should have been on Dust rather than on Alter. And this is really looking at drone technology and the future of drone technology. Except, and here's the thing, there's a lot of truth in it. A lot of truth in it. And yet, they turn it around. And they're obviously trying to target the so-called what they see as the far right with it. Because what happens is the government create these weapons, these drones that are very miniature, and you have a swarm of them. And they can follow their target around and fly around, and it's impossible to get away from. Because, of course, they're AI as well. This is a development of the drone in that no one actually flies them or anything like that. And from a remote position, they fly themselves and think for themselves. So you basically program them into following their target, whoever you want killed and so on, and then they go off and kill them. But the technology gets cheaper, they fall into the wrong hands, and they go out, and it's never really said that it's right-wing extremists or whatever, but it's hinted at, particularly because universities are targeted, and they talk about, well, who would want to kill university students and that kind of thing. And we all know, of course, that the university campuses have been hotbeds of leftist thought for, well, a century now, really. Or more, actually, if you want to look at going back a long way, 350 years or more ago, the roots of the English Civil War, as it's called, which should be called the British Civil War, was sown at Cambridge University, which, of course, was the foundations of liberalism. But anyway, I mean, they're really getting at this idea that with the democratization of technology can fall into what they see as the wrong hands. But who is the wrong hands exactly? I mean, we've got governments going around terrorizing the world and destabilizing legitimate governments at the moment because they don't like the fact that they're not liberal.
And famously bombing and drone striking weddings in foreign countries.
Yes.
Not done by any right-wing group, be they cartoon Nazis or anything else. It's done by governments.
That's right. So this idea, and then what you get at the end is this university professor from Berkeley who gives a little lecture, a mini lecture about how terrible it could be. This is the future if this kind of technology gets in the wrong hands and so on. And of course, well, you guys developed it, and you developed it to pick on people who you didn't like.
So they're upset that a tool that they made for assassinating people has been used to assassinate people.
Yeah, but the wrong people, of course.
It's a bit bad, isn't it? Oh, dear.
Yeah, well, this is the quandaries that they've got themselves into. They tie themselves into knots, the left, because they always say that they're really tolerant, but are they tolerant of us? Not really. In fact, far from it. And, of course, they're quite happy to commit violence against the likes of you and I. I've been on a stall in Barnsley, the former British National Party stall, and people have felt that they could attack us with impunity from the far left, which they could because the police stated that basically, as far as they were concerned, they had their orders, they warned us in advance, because they were decent in Barnsley, to be honest, the police. And they said, look, we've got our orders, we don't really like it, but basically, if any trouble starts, well, you're the ones we have to arrest. and so the extreme left thought that they could basically harass us with impunity. And of course, several British National Party members were hospitalized by the extreme left, Antifa and so on. And this, of course, never gets talked about.
Never gets covered in the media as political violence.
That's right. Bash the Fash is a badge of pride on the extreme left, but yet, well, who do they call the fash exactly? I'm not a fascist. I don't think that fascist ideology works. I don't think that it's particularly good. I think that it's flawed. I think there's some good things in it, but as a general whole, I think that it's too flawed to work. But still, they would label me as a fascist or a Nazi or whatever. I have no time for Adolf Hitler, but that's what they do. They label you, and then all of a sudden, because you have that label that they have assigned to you, you're basically a target.
Well, in the past, they'd have been pointing at you probably and calling you a witch or something, wouldn't they? And that would be the excuse.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, if you look at the foundations of liberalism, they come from Puritanism. So, witch burning has been the mark of the far left since it first began. But anyway, so that's another one, Slaughterbots. It's a shame because actually, if it hadn't been for the politics and so on, which was so overt, and that bloody professor that came on at the end, it would have worked. It would have worked if they'd just been more open, that anyone can get their hands on this, that evil governments can get their hands on it, and that equally dissenters can get their hands on it, and so on, which is actually the truth. But they had to get their bloody politics in there, and it's a shame. I mean, even if that Berkeley professor at the end hadn't have put his 2p in, they would have gotten away with that film, because it's not a bad film as a film. Any others on the political front you want to mention?
No, I think I was high and clear after that. I was more lucky than you were.
Yes, it seems so. I've got a last one, which may or may not be political, actually, because it's called home education. And one of the things that the far left hates at the moment is homeschooling, of course. And anyone who homeschools their children, or who have, like the Irish nationalists of the late 19th, early 20th century, they founded these hedge schools, these collective schools where they kept up the Irish language and Irish culture and so on, which was a good thing. And it kept nationalism in the marrow. And this is why, of course, the extreme left despise people who educate their own.
And isn't it weird when you think in the past, hippies and things wanted to do their own schools and communities. So something that the left at one time would embrace, they now try and demonise. Yeah,
well, of course, this is because they have now whole-scale taken over the institutions.
But it shows you there's a real motivation there. Why it's wanted, why it's suddenly hated.
Absolutely right, yeah. And of course, when you've got people like the weathermen who are now, they're coming up for retirement or they've retired, but they got nice little jobs as university and college professors and so on. These one-time domestic terrorists of the extreme left who were bombing people, civilians and so on, ended up becoming professors at university and things. Extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary.
In the other side, where if somebody just says an incorrect statement, according to the mainstream politics, some politically incorrect statement, their career can be ruined. They'll hound him for life. They'll try and destroy him in any way they can. They know where he lives. They'll abuse him outside the door. And yet there's people that have actually committed violence and they get a free pass.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, as I say, the double standard with the extreme left. They don't believe in honesty or anything like that. It's pointless debating with these people, except when you debate in public, on public talk shows and stuff like that. And then you can publicly humiliate them and show them for what they really are. But other than that, there's no point in going on Facebook and things like that and trying to debate with them or talk them around or anything like that. They're insane, these people.
I mean, they really are just sort of mirrors of religious fanatics of yesteryear.
Because they came from that background originally. As I say, a few centuries ago, that's exactly what they were. And it is, actually, when you look at it, Marxism is a form of religious fundamentalism, with Marx as the new Jesus. And all these neo-Marxist theorists that have come afterwards, particularly the Frankfurt School and John Paul Sartre and so on and so forth, deconstructionists and feminists and all that kind of thing. These are all like Latter-day Saints. So it has almost a mirror of Christianity that went before it. And it has quite a similar outlook on the world if one looks at it. But I think that's for another video to
You'll be getting
much to go into
that.
here, I think. Yeah.
Been an interesting one for another time.
yeah, we're going to have a hard look at that, I think, as a discussion on a Mjolnir special, not Mjolnir the movies, but one of our particular podcasts that we do. I think that we have to address that. But anyway, so the Home Education. Now, Home Education is not a bad film, actually. It gets a bit tedious in places. I'll give it that. But the premise is that there's a father, mother, and the daughter. They seem quite cut off. Although the daughter does indeed go out and socialize, it would appear, because she does come back home one day from being away, and the mother accuses her of being late and everything. The mother's obviously some kind of nutcase. The father's dead and lays upstairs in this state of death, basically. But the mother insists that he's coming back and he's just testing us. And of course, the corpse starts rotting, and this too is a test. And they have to stop the corpse from rotting. And the daughter becomes as deranged as the mother, but in a different way. And she says that the test is different. She whacks the mother over the head with this bone and ties her up and everything, and says that she's got the test completely wrong. The test is different, that they have to put him in a vacuum pack, basically, that you put clothes in, so that it preserves the body from being, from rotting and so on.
Do him up Lenin style.
Yes. And so there's a bit of black humor in there, I suppose. I think that as a film, it's not bad. It just does get a bit tedious in place. And there's a nice bit of attention to detail, to be honest. They're like little signs up all over the place saying things like... a door is useless without a lock. It's that kind of stuff. And a slipper is a shoe for the house. And that kind of thing. So there are all these little kind of quirks where you can see that they're not quite right in the head. And so, yeah, it's not a bad film, but is it a horror? Not really. Well, I don't know. It could be classed as a psychological horror, I suppose.
Yeah.
But really... I don't know.
I like some of the psychological horror stuff. I like it because it usually doesn't resort to too cheap a tactics like some of the modern jump scare filled ones do. Yeah,
that's right, yeah. It does kind of slowly develop. And there are some nice little quirks in it as well. There's a jump scare with this dead sheep's head and so on. Or a goat's head, I can't remember which. But as a whole, it gets a bit tedious. They should have thrown a few things like that more in it, I think. But has a good claustrophobic atmosphere to it, which is nice. So, getting away from the political aspect then, have you got any good ones, really good ones that people should watch?
Oh, yeah. I was quite lucky with some of my finds. One I definitely recommend watching, especially if you like Lovecraft stuff, is Behind. It's a very short one. It's just under 5 minutes. French language, so going into it, sorry French people, but I was expecting weirdness. But it turned out... the French weirdness in film worked out perfectly because this is Lovecraft and it should be weird. Yeah, it's told in a really clever way. At first, I never have a look at the comments with any of these because and I'm spoiling it rotten here, so I should probably should have put a spoiler warnings at the start of this discussion, but it's obvious when we're talking about these, it's going to get spoiled. But it starts off with a woman in some kind of hypnotherapy or memory regression session with some kind of therapist laying on the couch, and the therapist is talking to her, encouraging her to explore these memories. And you get told this backstory in a sort of disjointed but interesting way, sort of teasing out the story, where she talks about memories of seeing things on TV, being in the woods, getting this book in the post and so on. And it builds up and up. And it tells a story in a very clever way because it's told at just the right pace, not to be too slow where you'll get bored, but not too fast that you don't have time to think about the clues being dropped. You're able to piece together the backstory from the sort of nuggets shown and told on screen. And as it builds up, you get this really good, I'll not completely ruin it, but you get this really good reveal at the end where you get this very good kind of Lovecraftian feel to the story.
That's great because good Lovecraftian films are few and far between.
It's 5 minutes, so obviously you're not going to get a lot of plot, but it felt great. It felt the kind of thing where after watching it, you'll think, that's great, I want more. I want to see more of this. And
I'm going to watch that after this podcast.
Definitely. And even watching the subtitles, you still can get the emotion because the actors are obviously doing a good job. The facial expressions are great. Camera angles, the sound, the way they use the soundscape, whatever you want to call it, it's done great as well. The hints of sound and music. There's some nice effects, subtly done. Hints of things, flashes of things. They've known how to use just what they need to make your imagination do the rest and creep you out, which is spot on, exactly what you should do. You shouldn't have, things thrown in your face all the time. That's overdone by now. What they've done was psychological, but leading you where he wants you to be, the position you want to be, where it's creeped out. I thought it was excellent. And I went in thinking, as soon as the French language came up, I thought, oh no, I'm going to have to read subtitles. And then I thought, I'll bet is this going to be really weird like that one we reviewed on Dust? But no, it was definitely good quality. I would have watched quite happily an hour and a half of this, and with the subtitles, no problem. If they could have kept that kind of interest and quality up, which would be a big challenge from just a 5-minute film, obviously. But they've shown talent here, and it's definitely worth seeing.
That's great because I speak French anyway, so that's even better.
Well, you'll be able to judge the acting better then, but I certainly the emotions and because I can read the subtitles obviously as I'm listening to them, I definitely felt that they were acting well, and a lot of it, of course, is physical acting because most of these short stories don't have very heavy dialogue. Although this one did have a lot more dialogue than most because of the way the story's told in this therapy session. But it's clever. It's cleverly done, the way it's disjointed and it catches you out with some surprises in it. Because at first it's jarring and you're confused, and then it sort of leads you along and sort of explains, it's meant to be jarring and confusing. It's done in I'll not spoil it completely just because I enjoyed it so much.
Tremendous. No, I shall give that a watch straight after this podcast, I think.
It's called Behind. 4 minutes, 54 seconds.
Tremendous. I've got one that's I think's really good. Now, you mentioned animation earlier. There's a really good stop-motion animation film called Operator.
I saw it as well.
You saw that?
I was going to mention that one as well, so you carry on.
Well, we'll both mention it. So yeah, this is absolutely tremendous, and
fantastic. I love seeing stop motion still being used, though.
Yeah,
that's one thing about it. It has a certain quality and atmosphere and style of its own that just can't be replicated with any other medium.
Yeah, I'm a great fan of Nick Park's work, for example. I think he's tremendous, and it sells as well. I mean, Nick Park's films are always box office draws.
Oh, and he made a fortune in advertising as well. Folk forget that.
Yeah. In fact, he started off in advertising, didn't he? What was the company he was advertising now? Was it BT?
No, it was Power, was it? It might have been BT. I can't remember.
Yeah. Oh, no, you're right. Yeah, it was some kind of power. Yeah.
I think they were talking about heating some
kind
of them.
Energy. Yeah, you're right. You're right. It was, yeah. And that it was called Creature Comforts.
That's it, Creature Comforts. And you can buy them on DVDs, so you can buy. It became this series of its own.
Yeah, absolutely, and it was brilliant. And people realised that they should give him a break, which they did do. And he came up, of course, with Wallace and Gromit, which is now world famous and has become a huge merchandising market as well, because it's just so marvelously great. And the thing about it is that. It's so great because it's quintessentially English, particularly Northern English. It's kind of that Dales area of Yorkshire. So obviously it appeals to me, but I think that it appeals to anyone from Britain and of a wider European sensibility anyway. So it's kind of quintessentially from Yorkshire, but equally branching out and everything. It's quintessentially European at the same time. And that's what gives it its charm. And that's why people relate to it and why it draws people in. R.I.P. Peter Sellers, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was the first and the best for me, Wallace and Gromit voice. It's Wallace's voice, but anyway.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And veteran of Last of the Summer Wine, of course, which was filmed in in Yorkshire, in Holmfirth. Right. Anyway, but yeah, back to Operator.
Which I'll note that they've got episode 1 there. Episode 2 is on the artist's own channel on YouTube, and he's working on episode 3. So he's actually had success from this. He had a crowdfunding to make another episode. He got about $11,000 to continue it.
Right, I didn't realise there was a second episode.
Yeah, there's a second episode, not on this channel, not on Alter, but on his own channel. He's possibly get it syndicated elsewhere. But he's also working on an episode 3. He's got a teaser up on his own channel for it. No doubt stop motion like that will take a while, because the teaser was up a few months ago. Stop motion's famously a very long process, so that'll probably be out in a few months.
Yeah. I mean, it really is a labour of love, stop motion, because, of course, you've got to move these clay models or plasticine models or whatever a bit at a time. It's what Ray Harryhausen used to do, of course, back in the day.
And you need tremendous memory and vigilance with it, because you've got to remember every wee movement in order, what it should be, where you're trying to go, where you've been, everything in that scene that has to be addressed. So if you've got liquids moving, flames in a scene Harry dealt with in his, like, you'll see a lot of his scenes, you'll have things like buildings casting shadows, flames causing flickering effects. How you do that in stop motion's tremendous. When you see this sort of behind the scenes, it's amazing how they sit and think all this out in tiny steps for days on end to do one wee tiny scene.
Yeah, I mean, it's painstaking, but I mean, it's a wonderful craft, to be honest. You've got to take your hat off to
it's a special kind of person that can manage this and get that kind of quality out. And I think the promise that the artist behind Operator shows is tremendous.
Yeah, it's extremely well done. And it's a nice little story as well. It really is kind of, although it's stop motion, you really get a sense of horror with it.
Well, once you're into it, you get past the fact it's stop motion, I would say, once he gets to the door, before he enters his workspace. By that point, you're sort of drawn into it, and you've sort of forgotten almost what it is.
Yeah. And I mean, looking at the politics of it, it's something that we can get behind, as well as the people who are genuine sort of anti-capitalists on the left, which there are not that many of them, to be honest, but ones who are genuine. It does have very much an anti-industrialist message to it, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Although, there again, it's not rammed down your throat.
Yeah, it's just there as a background set.
Yeah,
it happens to be there.
And I thought it was actually very Kafkaesque in a way, because Kafka also deals with the bureaucratic, the post-industrial, and the grotesque at the same time, and also the kind of impossibility of life in post-industrial societies, and how people are sort of pushed into situations by authority, and often an unseen authority, and so it has that to it. And no, I think it's wonderfully done, and you have that with this small confined space, the room, and of course you get that creature in there as well, and so you get the claustrophobia and this sort of transhumanist creature, if you like, of it's flesh, but it's metal at the same time. And so that, again, is looking at things like Industry 4.0, which is the latest in integrating people and machinery. And there's a bit of a warning there, actually, and I think a very pertinent warning at that. I think that it has a very good message to it. Okay, it appeals to my sensibility and it appeals to my politics. But nonetheless, it's great as a film. The politics are not shoved down your throat or anything like that. You don't have some professor on at the end explaining things or some kind of blurb underneath.
No, this is the thing. It didn't have that. It told a story and it gave a message without the need to give you a manifesto with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I recommend that entirely. I think it's brilliantly done.
And also there was the kind of element of double claustrophobia when you think about it. He's in this tiny room, but also the creature envelops him.
Yeah, there's a sort of nod towards Alien, isn't there? There.
And it was amazing how, when you watch it, you feel quite tense watching this claymation character trying to do this kind of nonsense job, as he seems to have this nonsense job, and hectically getting orders back to him while trying to avoid this incredibly creepy alien thing in the room.
Yeah. I'm not going to give the ending away, but the ending, it's you don't expect it at all.
No, it's very clever.
Yeah.
And I'll not give it away, but yeah, it's very clever the way it's done. But the ending is justified. You don't feel like it's a sudden spin around. It makes sense in a repeat viewing, or if you kind of follow it along and think back what you saw, and it gives you hints what's coming because you see the behaviour.
It does, yeah, but you don't expect it.
No, you don't. But it's like a good murder mystery film. At the end, you shouldn't feel that's bullshit. There's no way I could have known that. You should feel, oh yeah, I see. That's why they're the murderer. I should have known because blah blah blah. At the end, it made sense. It all made sense because it's well written.
Absolutely brilliant writing. Absolutely brilliant writing. I'm ashamed to say I didn't look his name up.
Sam Barnett.
Tremendous. I got to hand it to that guy.
Yep.
He's good.
And he certainly deserved his, I think it was Kickstarter he was on. He managed to get an episode funded off of that. So, he deserved it. Well done. He's producing something good. So, it'd be worth anybody listening checking out his episode 2, and maybe this year you'll see episode 3 whenever he's ready. He's got a teaser trailer for episode 3 as well. He seems to want to make a series out of this, which I'd say, yeah, fair enough. It looks like it's got legs.
Yeah. Well, I haven't seen episode 2 yet, but that's another one I'm going to see very shortly because looking forward to that.
I love though the hint it gave towards what was going on. When I'll not spoil it, but you see a certain behavioural change when he's attacked. There's a certain pattern to how it all unfolds, and that to me is the difference between bad writing and cheap gotchas and good writing, doing a show not tell. If you see what I mean.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
The way that's done was brilliant, and I have to leave it at that without ruining it all, but I just wanted to get that bit in just to praise that development of the plot in such a short time as well. It feels like there's so much more to it because he's written what feels like a good, bigger world. But of course, it's still a very short film, 7 minutes or something. Yeah. But yet it feels like you watch a lot
7
more.
minutes, that's right, yeah.
So,
absolutely right, yeah.
Brilliant.
And any other good ones you've looked at?
Yeah, there was another one, the Blue Door. I don't know if you saw that one.
Nope, that's new to me. Hit it.
It got a BAFTA nomination, which conversely to me that sounded like the death knell. I was waiting for something terrible. I was thinking, oh no, it's like the mark of the beast. But it actually turns out not only did it get nominated, it also won, and it was picked up by Amblin for a full film treatment later on. So I don't know what the full film treatment be. It obviously cannot be the same as the short story because the short story is 9 minutes long, including the credit blurb. So when they talk about development into a full story, it's not going to resemble this or give you the same feeling when you make that 90 minutes instead of 9 minutes. You can't possibly. The same way a lot of crap trailers are nothing like the film you just watched. But I'll judge the short story, not the film that hasn't been made yet. This film's interesting. It stars somebody that a lot of people recognise now because she was in the TV series Game of Thrones. She played one of the main characters in it. Gemma Whelan. I'm not quite sure how to say her name. Whelan.
Which character did she play?
She played Yara Greyjoy in Game of Thrones TV series.
Oh, the Leather, yeah.
The what?
The Leather.
She wasn't that in the books. See, I'm more familiar with the books than the TV series. But yeah, that's right. They portrayed her as that in this TV series. She wasn't that in the books.
I haven't read the books, and I've only seen Game of Thrones the series in clips. So.
I wouldn't recommend the books either, to be honest. The books are better, but I still wouldn't recommend them. It's a big old slog, to be honest. There's always something better to read.
Yeah, that's true.
That's no mark on the actress. She's just getting paid and doing a job. And this, she did a very good job. There's essentially no dialogue, unless you count like a muttered curse or something. But I would say, just her doing a sort of performance, very good performance, showing. At first, she's a carer go into house and you see her put down, obviously, her marching orders on the NHS. It's a palliative care nurse. So it's very, again, this is how a good story, you show, don't tell. It's just her dropping that palliative care notice order. It's giving you this explanation, and she has a quick look around the house before she goes upstairs to see the patient, and you see it's in disarray, sinks full of dishes, and she does a great job of showing genuine emotion and concern and sort of sadness. And at first you're sort of thinking it's almost like a story about sort of lonely, elderly, unwell in their home, sort of trapped in their home and so on. So it feels like that kind of story you're getting told at first. And then while she's doing the dishes, she's sort of very, you can see the kind of pity in her eye, and they sort of care for what looks like a catatonic elderly woman upstairs. You see sort of dirty plates round her. She's got food stains on her mouth, sort of dried on round her mouth. And so she tidies up the house, does the dishes, goes upstairs and sort of uses a wet cloth to clean the food away. And as she's cleaning her hand, she notices a kind of strange symbol tattooed in the old woman's wrist. Kind of looks at it a bit and then thinks nothing of it. Starts tidying up the house, moving dust sheets. And there's a great transition where the camera's following her in the sitting room, and she's taking these dust sheets to try and make the place look nicer and tidy up. And it follows her across this sitting room where you just see her sort out some lamps and things. And then it pans back to the other side of the sitting room where she does stuff. And when she walks back, there's this blue door suddenly in the wall. And she hasn't noticed it, but you as the viewer see this. It's especially as the wall's painted, I think it's a shade of red. So it really stands out, this blue door suddenly has appeared as she's walking by. And it's exactly how it should be done. And she just walks by, not noticing it, because it's not appeared with a puff of smoke. It's just there, suddenly there. So it's a great bit of camera work. They've obviously had to cut that in and change the set. So that's a great bit of work there with the camera work and editing. The fact they've had to plan that and just get a really nice, smooth transition, because she walks from one side to the other and back, and suddenly in this same set you've got this door there. And of course she notices the door.
This is what Stanley Kubrick was quite good at in The Shining, actually, where
clearly inspired by this.
Things in the background and stuff like that.
Yeah. You get that sort of feeling, like that classic horror stuff, which is just right. It's exactly what they should do. And she notices this door, and of course, curiosity eventually takes over. She tries the handle, listens at the door, she finds a key, and as she tries the door starts rattling. There's something in the other side. So from trying to force the door open, she's now shoving furniture up against it and jamming things under the handle to stop it. And eventually it stops, and she walks out the sitting room, and you think, oh, right, that was interesting. And there's an even better transition than before. She's back in the hallway where you saw her at the start putting her palliative care notice orders in her mobile phone earlier on. She sort of sat them on a kind of side table in the hallway. So she's back in that hallway, and you see her kind of confused and weirded out, but she's kind of, okay then. It just does this great transition where she walks past the front door, and right as she's sort of in the middle of the front door, with the front door behind her facing away, the front door changes into the blue door again. So the blue door's moved from a wall in the sitting room to now covering up the front door. And you just see the lighting change as this happened. Great transition, great editing again. I actually went back and kind of watched it 2 or 3 times. I thought that is really smoothly done. The way the light changes and the door's put in. Very well done, very well done. And of course, she's now disturbed. And once again, you get this sense of tension, the thrill. The door starts getting tried, the door handle gets tried, something's on the other side of the door again, and she starts to kind of freeze up in panic as she's watching this door get tried and somebody's pushing at the door on the other side. She fumbles for a mobile phone, drops it, of course, because this is horror. Everybody has to drop the phone or the torch. I'll not begrudge them that. And she ends up running upstairs into the old woman's room. As she goes into the room, closes the door behind her in panic, and she's leaning the door, kind of calming down. And as the door pans to her kind of calming down, the door she's leaning on is the blue door now. It's great. It's absolutely fantastic, because it's talking about a kind of a cheap looking door that's painted with like emulsion paint, but you've turned a door into a blue painted wooden door into something scary this thing that seems to be hounding her. Absolutely fantastic. Very well done. Without any, again, no dialogue. This is all just her acting, which she does very well. I'll give her the credit. Purely, everything's rested on her acting skill up to this point. Obviously, other than the also credit to directors and writers planning all this, but her acting skills carrying this as well. And I don't know if I should spoil the very ending, should I?
I go on. They can go off and have a look at it, and then they can come back. Well, so if you want to watch it, go away and watch it now, and then come back.
That's right. It's only 9 minutes. So at the very end, she's panicking. This door's kind of behind her. She sees it again, and she notices a symbol in the door, which matches the symbol on the old woman's wrist now. And she's kind of confused at what's going on here. And the door starts getting tried again, because it's suddenly the door handle turns down and gets pushed open. And she, of course, slams the door shut. She pushes back, gets the door shut, and puts furniture up against the door to hold it shut. And you hear, you're not sure what you hear, but you hear something on the other side, like the door kind of click or something, and it stops getting pushed. And you see her kind of calm down, and she turns round, and the bed's empty, and it keeps panning round, and you just see at the edge of the bed the old woman's nose and eyes, and they're now the eyes are wide open, and these creepy kind of yellow eyes as she's looked at her. I think she mutters something like, "Oh God," starts to pull away the furniture, the door's locked, and the old woman just runs at her like this beast and takes her down, and it cuts out. Brilliant. It's a really tense moment. You know, you really felt like, get out, get out. You're really drawn in by this point, because one, you obviously sympathise with the nurse character. You couldn't help sympathise with her because she seems like such a good person doing good work, and then she's drawn into this step-by-step horror, and it's all sort of logical. The fact that she's sort of herded into this room, you don't feel like it's retarded. Like a lot of these things, they're in the haunted house and they decide to go into the basement or something, and I'll take the only torch in the house, and you kind of roll your eyes. But her, it made sense why she was kind of herded along and frightened. And there's a lot of people interpreting what's going on there. People are saying, is it perhaps that the person on the other side of the door was herself in another scene trying to get out? And every time she's been blocking the door, she was actually blocking herself trying to get out the old woman's room. So there's quite a few people interpreting what's going on in the story, which is nice. I don't think anybody needs to explain everything in any story. It's nice to have a bit of mystery and a bit of room to think about it.
Yeah,
and
that's good.
It's really worth watching. It's obviously low budget, but it's well acted. The directing, cinematography is spot on. It's really well done.
That's all you need.
Yeah. And there was no need to cram any politics or nonsense in. And in fact, you could look at it as I thought it was maybe hinting at some of the social issues, genuine ones about people maybe needing care, a bit alone in the house. But it didn't use that and ram it in your face. It actually told an interesting story and a really genuine horror thrill out it.
Yeah, well, I mean, Neil used to make some horror films at one time, sort of more psychological horror, that kind of thing, which, obviously, given that they have no budget whatsoever, used simple craft techniques and that kind of thing, and they were really well done. Black and white films. Yeah, I shall link to them below.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you're talking about horror cliches, actually, it's an interesting because I saw a couple of films which were horror comedies, and often the way to get around horror cliches these days is to make fun of them, and it's often the only way to get around because they've been done to death now. I mean, Hollywood have pumped out so many horror films that rely on the same kind of tropes and cliches and so on and motifs for so long that they churn out about 20 a year or something. Especially, and then there, of course, the independent stuff and all that kind of thing. So the only way is to kind of make a bit of fun of them. So I've got a couple here that were interesting on the Alter channel, and those were The Bloody Ballad of Squirt Reynolds and We Summoned a Demon, which were basically making fun of typical. The Bloody Ballad of Squirt Reynolds was making fun of the kind of Michael Myers type, the Friday the 13th, and that kind of film. Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Slashers.
The running. That's right, the slasher films. Although, I mean, is Texas Chainsaw Massacre a slasher film because he's got a chainsaw? but it's that kind of thing, isn't it? It's the indestructible demonic figure who's human but yet somehow indestructible, killing off a bunch of generally teenagers. And so the Bloody Ballad of Squirt Reynolds makes fun of that. And you have that campfire setting, the typical kind of thing. This guy is telling telling a story, and it's a bit of a joke, really. It's a joke played on one of them because the guy jumps out and scares her and so on.
Which
but
was
equally,
they were already doing that parody in the Friday the 13th films quite early on. They had the scenes where the campers were telling jokes and people leaping out pretending to be Jason. And I think the first 2 or 3 films they were already doing it then.
Yeah, that's right. So they've copied it almost. But there's a thing where there's the guy and he's playing an instrument, and he brings out this huge, bloody, great big keyboard and starts making the horror music on this keyboard. So that's a bit different. But yeah, I suppose that it's been done, and they did it in Hollywood with I Know What You Did Last Summer, those kind of films, and even. Oh, what was the film that came off the Scream films? There was a series of horror comedies that took the piss out of the Scream films, but I can't remember what they were.
Oh, yeah, I know the one you mean. Oh, I can't remember. Somebody will no doubt remember it in the comments. Scary Movie.
Scary Movie, that's the one, yeah. Yeah, so even that's been done, I suppose.
Yeah, that was a whole series.
Yeah, exactly. And We Summoned a Demon. I mean, it had its moments, it was quite amusing. There's some little wisecracks like where they thought that they'd escaped from the demon, and one of the guys says, "Oh, great, we've escaped. We're going to live forever." That kind of thing. Where it's obvious that they're not. But I suppose in a way, the horror genre has been done to death so much now that it's difficult to be original, and one of the ways that people try to be original is actually just to make fun of it. But even that's been done.
Maybe it's a case of they're just waiting for the next big break, the big change. Because I suppose everybody probably felt things were getting tired until the slasher sort of genre was born. And particularly with Halloween, though, there was sort of proto-slasher stuff before that. But that sort of changed the tone and the direction of things for a long time. So maybe that's what we're sort of waiting on, the next thing to sort of inspire the next generation of films.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as Halloween showed, it was done in a budget. So there was films with 10 times the budget, which were far more tired and boring.
This is very true. And I think that it's very difficult, actually, to do a horror film now because people have become desensitized to horror.
I think it's also the temptation to throw everything in. Think of everything you've seen in horror films and you think, oh, I've got to throw that. You think, oh, I've got to have tons of gore, tons of explosions and shock. I think that's one of the problems where the ease of having these things in a film now can become a handicap because everybody's now numb to it and you get hit with it from almost the first act non-stop. It becomes a crutch and then it becomes a curse and weakens itself. So I've seen a few films benefit from a very disciplined use of the horror aspect. Like, folk forget, the first Halloween, there was very little blood in it, really. Yeah, there were scenes where horrible things happened, but later films that supposedly took inspiration from it would have pints of blood and half of a butcher shop spread over the floor every scene. Well, even when people get stabbed, there wasn't actually a lot of gore with the first one, but it's still a great film. So
That's true, yeah.
So I think part of it is a false idea that you have to keep up with this arms race of gore, where you constantly have to double up, which was also parodied and very sort of mentioned in a very self-aware way in Scream, Wes Craven's film, which was this sort of cynical look at the whole horror industry as well, and then ironically ends up just getting copied slavishly instead of taken as this sort of warning against becoming cliched.
Yeah, yeah. We Summoned the Demon also has some of those cliches in with the gore and so on. Like there's blood spraying out everywhere a lot, but overdone, if you see what I mean, to comic effect. Yeah, as I say, even that's been done. But I do recommend watching We Summon the Demon and the Bloody Ballad of Squirt Reynolds. It's a bit of fun for a few minutes, but that's about it, really. You can't look at it from an artistic point of view because there's not that much artistry to it. But it's a bit of good fun, and that's it. Have you got any really good ones to end with?
Oh yeah, I don't know if you saw it. It actually got the most views on the channel, called The Doll Maker. Don't know if you saw that one.
No, I haven't yet, but I saw the little thumbnail for it, and I thought, that's probably one to watch.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, it is. It's one to watch. Another straight up, very clever horror one. Very well written. Good surprises in it. Nothing cheap about it, as in, the cheap crutches of horror. It's done very cleverly. I won't spoil it because spoiling it would, I feel, would really cripple it. It's one of these films where you don't want to ruin stuff with it. It's very well done. Recommend it 100%. But the main thing is, when you watch it, you'll see, again, it relies heavily on performances of the actors. Nothing wrong with that. Exactly what you'd expect with any film. It's got to rely on actors at some point. Actors are great in this. I've never seen them before in anything, but I'm surprised they don't get more work because they're all superb. It's got very simple sets. Probably it's set in a kind of urban setting. Probably is just genuinely somebody's house they filmed in. I doubt they had to build anything. Got some basic props that probably cost next to nothing to make, but are very effective. And it tells an interesting story with not a preachy moral, but you could see there's a moral to the story as well that's healthy. No matter what your politics are, I find it hard to argue. Anybody could argue that the moral of this kind of story, it was unhealthy. But I won't spoil it just because I actually enjoyed it so much. It's called The Doll Maker. It's 9 minutes total, but it certainly has earned its 12 million views. It's a very good story.
Tremendous. I shall give that one a
I will
watch
note,
as well.
It does a very good intro to it, where storytelling, to tell a backstory, is always one of the sort of stumbling blocks. And in a short story or a short movie, it's even more of a stumbling block. The last thing you want is an exposition dump at the start, somebody talking over you for hours. Or this thing tells a story within seconds, and you've already got a complicated life story told to you. Just what you need, but you can infer the rest. Very cleverly done. When you watch it, I would say take notes if you're some sort of filmmaker or story writer, because it was well done. Maybe some people say, oh, well, that's obvious, but it can't be that obvious because I've seen backstory told so badly in Hollywood films with $100 million budgets, some supposed experts. So that's something I would say was a standout thing, even though it's minor early on. Also, a lot of good music and sound again, which I think with horror is almost a kind of partner in it. You can't treat it as a secondary thing like you could maybe in an action film where you could think about, oh, what kind of music do I want after? I think sound in horror plays a much bigger part, and in this they were aware of that. So it's very clever. You'll see there's one bit in it where I almost felt like it was a nod to Gremlins. And you'll know exactly what I mean, Dave, when you list it. And anybody else familiar with Dante's work, Joe Dante, will know what I'm talking about. But there was nothing cliched. It felt very fresh and original. I don't feel like this is something that's been done before in the sense that it's cliched or boring. It felt fresh and very good. I'd have been happy again to see this. This could have been maybe 15 minutes or and you could have put it in the wrapper of one of those sort of films full of short stories that used to be more popular in the past.
Ah, right.
Very good. It's
Uh,
very good.
yeah. I shall look forward to that one. Is there any that you would like to leave us with?
There was another one I would recommend, which was The Smiling Man. A very basic story, almost no story at all. But the director and writer obviously just wanted to give an atmosphere of creepiness and horror. And the main thing is that there's a child in it, which is the sort of who you're sort of over the shoulder and through the eyes of seeing things. She's a very young child. I don't know how old she is, but she puts in an amazing performance for such a young child. I mean, credit to her for putting in an acting performance that most adults probably couldn't manage, and obviously following direction well. But the real standout performance was the sort of horror monster in this, because this is one that relies on a sort of creature. It's a very basic makeup job, mostly body paint, but the actor puts in a tremendous physical performance without rubber monster outfit, without CGI, with just basically body paint and some fake teeth. It's sort of creepy, insane, disturbing, and you feel very much an edge. Very well done. There's a couple of bits when you're watching it you think maybe here and there, but his performance was so good you forgot about everything, the sort of things that maybe you weren't quite sure about or felt maybe needed explanation or story. His performance was worth seeing, and there was some nice surprises in it.
Yeah, I mean, that still works actually. Just a bit of makeup and
Oh yeah,
a great acting performance. The early Phantom of the Opera, I think, works with really well with Lon Chaney. Simply because of Lon Chaney's performance and the makeup that's done. It's really, even now, sort of an archetype of a grotesque.
It's the fact that it's so simple, but his performance is what sells it. It's not over the top, but it's constantly unsettling and sort of unnatural. The actors, really credit to him, and obviously the director for planning this. He must have a part as well in what the story he needs to tell. The film would have been broken completely if they didn't have a good actor at that point. Everything really hinged on that, because there's no real dialogue, there's no real plot. It's a sort of, I suppose it's just a sort of fright fest, a sort of haunted house experience, if you could imagine, taking you through a creepy setting and creepy things happen. You don't really get an explicit story, you get a sort of implied story, and I'll not spoil how it goes or how it ends, but yeah, it's worth watching for his acting and to see how disturbing he can be. And a minimum of makeup, he's just got some body paint, say some fake teeth, and the rest is just his incredible performance. Very creepy, very unsettling. They've set him against this child, and it obviously that sets you off as well, the creepy factor, and they've put these two together in a very clever way.
Tremendous. It just goes to show that you don't need a huge budget to make a really good film or to scare people or make effects.
No, I mean, this thing was giving you sort of Shining vibes, but it must have been doing it on a budget of, I mean, other than if you'd already had the camera equipment and you didn't have to pay the actors, what was in there would have probably cost you like $100 or something. You know, maybe in reality he had to pay to rent the home they filmed in, or he rented the cameras, because that's obviously a real cost you can't avoid. You have to have a camera. Often people have to rent them. But if you think that if somebody did that on their own camera and it was their friends, the material cost is probably like $100. You know, I don't know, but I can imagine it being done for very low, because so much of it was the performance of the child and the performance of the sort of monster actor, who was tremendous.
Yeah, and of course, as we always say, as we're wanting to challenge the Hollywood stranglehold on filmmaking, particularly as they've gone all SJW these days, it's really easy to get into filmmaking now. And more people should gather together and do it, because it doesn't cost much money at all.
I would compare this favourably to It, as in if you think of a creepy creature monster, that sort of has this the fear of the monster being around children and so on. You'll understand what I mean when you watch it. But I would say his performance in this film did a better job in many ways.
Yeah. I mean, the basics still work because what is it most of the time but a clown?
Yeah.
And yet it works. And actually, I mean, going back to the first filmed version of it from 1990, it worked far better when it was a clown than when it was a creature.
Yeah.
It was far more disturbing.
When it turns into a magical spider, it's all downhill.
I know that. Oh, it was the most disappointing ending I've ever seen in my life. It was much better when it was a clown.
Also, from the old TV movie version, you had Tim Curry doing a good job. And when it's a magical spider, that's out the window.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. It's just a marvelous performance by Tim Curry, who I'd forgotten until you reminded me that it was Tim Curry.
Everybody seems to forget it's him in films. Same with Legend. Everybody forgets that the devil was him. Over and over again, people keep forgetting. Same way he did a whole bunch of video game as well, voiceovers that people don't realise is Tim Curry as well.
Yeah.
He's quite a character.
Yes, it's true that he's a very good character actor, although I should say he was, because unfortunately he's had a stroke, hasn't he, now?
Apparently he's still doing voiceover though, so that's good to see because he's got a talent and his voice is so distinct. I would quite like to see him still keep his hand in the acting game if he can still do voice acting, audiobooks and things.
Yeah. So it just goes to show people that performances are extremely important. They're probably the best thing about a film. Well, two things really: a great script and a great performance. And then obviously you've got to have somebody decent behind the camera, but you don't have to rely on all these big budgets and effects and all that kind of stuff. Actually, often they're compensating for the basics that haven't been done well.
Yeah. Talent can carry you through, and all the rest is either polishing it or trying to mask the lack of talent, which never works. You cannot. The talent's the one thing you can't cover up or avoid to make something great instead of just being interesting or entertaining.
Yeah. So anyway, any last words or?
No, I'd say have a look at the Alter channel. It puts up videos regularly. There's going to be something different. If you've done something, consider submitting it to it because they take submissions. They do have a note there, just like Dust. It's only completed films. Don't send them scripts and pitches because they'll get deleted. They're not actually funding them. They're just there as a platform to share finished content. And certainly consider, if you've done short horror films, consider putting them on there. There's a whole bunch of people who have done films and hosted them on their own platforms or another platform and have also hosted it on theirs as well. Yeah. Why not? Gets it spread around.
Absolutely right, yeah. So with that, then it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
And remember to subscribe and to share this on social media if you can, please, because let's be honest, YouTube's algorithms are not going to direct anyone to us anytime soon. So have a good one and hope to see you next time. Goodbye.